All right. So I'm going to move this over here so that you can speak into it in here. So I'll give a brief introduction so we at least know where we are in the audio.
Perfect.
So this is Michael Cohen. I'm doing the interview, and we are in my office in Barrows Hall here at the University of California at Berkeley, and I'm sitting with Ramon Quintero, and it is May 2nd, 2012. Ramon, can you just state your name and spell it for us for the record, and then we'll get started.
My name is Ramon Quintero, RamonQuintero.
Great. So Ramon has generously offered to submit to an interview. So I want to, there's a lot for us to talk about, in particular protests on campus and a number of other things. But let me just start actually by asking you to tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, where you came from, how you came to be here at Cal, or anything you want to fill in between. And you can go into as much or as little detail as you care to.
Okay, a little bit about myself. I was born in Mexico in 1977, September 2nd. I was born in the state of Sinaloa. It's a state in the North Pacific region of Mexico, and I was raised in a small town named El Pozo. I lived there till I was 11. When I turned 11, after my birthday, my dad was killed in this small town. So my mom left the town and she was left widow with 3 kids, and myself being the oldest. She decided to migrate to the United States because she had a sister in Southern California, and she left us with my grandparents. She left me and my 2 younger brothers, Pedro and Claudia. And after 6 months, she was lucky enough to take advantage of IRCA, which is the 1986 Immigration Act, and she got she came at the right time, per se, to get a legal status. Really quick, she sent money to my grandparents and asked my grandparents to send us to the United States. So when I was before my 12th birthday, a coyote crossed me illegally through the border of Tijuana when I was 12, and then my life began in the U.S. When I was 12 years old in Southern California in the city of Whittier, where I went to middle school and high school and community college before transferring to UC Berkeley. And so that's kind of like my background as a undocumented underage kid. And eventually when I was about to graduate from high school on my 18th birthday, my mother had petitioned for my legal status to change, and I got I became a legal resident of California, let's just say, and so that's been the case ever since. So I went to community college and then Cal as a U.S. Resident, as a California resident, and now I'm a U.S. citizen after 5 years of that. I don't know where else to go from there.
That's quite enough. I mean, it's and the rest of your family, where are they?
My extended family, if you ask a Mexican, the rest of the family thinks about uncles, grandparents, and all that. They're all distributed along the U.S. northern border because they moved from that small town because there's the war on drugs and all these issues are very close to the history of my town. And I wrote my honors thesis here at the UC Berkeley Geography Department as an undergrad, kind of talking about this little town and how the war on drugs and NAFTA and all these development projects have displaced people through violence and not just physical violence, but like bureaucratic and economic violence. and we all, basically my town of 1,500 people, now it's like 700, and most of them are old people that cannot leave because they don't have anywhere else to go. But it's a history of displacement, my own. So I consider myself not an immigrant to the United States, but now I consider myself an internal colonial subject, and I also consider myself an exported child to the United States, because I don't have the history of I don't buy into this history narrative of immigration that the U.S. has.
Right.
Because I don't think I fit it.
Well, it's very vaguely applied to the southern border.
Yeah.
It tends to be European immigrants coming from a different era, Ellis Island and all. Can you tell me just a little bit about what your experience, because I think one of the things we want to talk about is why it is you're such a strong advocate for public schools in California in particular, among other things. But so what was your experience like as, a 12-year-old landing in Whittier, California, entering, a public middle school in Whittier? What was your experience? Just a little bit about what that was like.
My introduction to the American way of life was a walkout in my middle school. When I came into my middle school, it was the name of the middle school is East Whittier Middle School. The second day or the third day I was there, my friends were like, "Oh, we're gonna walk out," in Spanish, of course, because all my classmates didn't speak English.
How was your English at that point? Did you?
I didn't know any. I didn't know any English. I just people were translating for me, and I was basically struggling to understand what was happening around me, culturally and language-wise, and all these things that come when a child's removed from from a rural space to an actual city. Whittier is a suburban, but it's suburban LA, but it's still like part of a big city.
Sure.
And not knowing the language or the culture had its own struggles, but at the same time, what was more important for me, I think, in my own development, is this idea that there's this law that might affect you, and we're all walking out, and I didn't really know what the law was, but I know now that it was Proposition 187, which was seeking to eliminate public education and health services for undocumented kids.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was my introduction to the American educational system. A walkout.
And California's
in
hostility to immigrants.
Yeah, in California. And so that was the first step in me thinking, oh, okay, people walk out here.
Did you see that as being fundamental in terms of politicizing you?
I think so. At that point, I didn't really know the implications of walking out or even the law. I just knew it was something bad for me or for my friends, and I didn't even have this consciousness that I was a Mexican to begin with yet, because I think I never thought about my nationality till I came to the U.S.
Right.
When people started telling me that I was Mexican, and I was like, really? Okay, I guess I am.
I was just a person, but
yeah, because when you grow up in a small little town and if you're part of the homogeneous population, there's no question. What's more important is like, what's your last name or who are your parents, especially when you're a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
You don't question this idea of nationality and that being something that's valued at some level. Was very abstract in my mind, I think, at that point. So that was kind of my introduction to public education. It's like this, basically, my teacher, Miss Fajardo, which was my middle school teacher, told me this. Basically, she told us this law is seeking to eliminate this bilingual program you're part of, and I didn't even know if I was supposed to value that anyways, but I thought it was cool that we were gonna walk out, and it just felt good. It was like okay, this is good. Why not?
And did you continue this kind of history of activism and walkouts into through high school and through
High
college?
school, the next year, I went 2 years to middle school.
Mm-hmm.
In my 8th grade, there was this what was called the race riots because
Rodney King, or
I don't know if it was Rodney King or
sorry,
it had to do maybe I think it was still this anti-immigrant.
okay,
And being in middle school, as some of us have experienced, middle school is particularly hard for because of issues of bullying, issues of like it's just being, outright racist or just violent,
mm-hmm.
basically acting out what their parents or TV teaches them.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had this huge. I remember this huge incident where half of the school was Mexican or Latino, and the other half was white. There's these Whittier was like that in the early 90s,
Mm-hmm.
and the schools reflected that, and there was this racial divide.
Mm-hmm.
And I was being buzzed there too. It wasn't like the school wasn't in my community.
Mm-hmm.
There's other schools in my community, but they didn't have the funds to have bilingual programs, so I was being buzzed to Whittier.
Okay.
Which is part of the legacy of the civil rights and
Right.
integration and all that, and all the issues that came with it, right?
But it's an odd place because isn't Whittier where Richard Nixon was from?
Yeah, this is Richard Nixon is from.
I mean, that's all I.
Yeah.
Whittier,
He went to high school, Whittier High School, and Whittier College, and not that many people really remember him. To be honest, I mean, because Whittier's very much a different place now
Yeah.
than it was in the early '90s. 20 years later. It's like it went from like 40% Latino and 60% white to like 30% white and 70% Latino now.
Mm.
So it has flipped completely.
Interesting.
And I think in the middle school, that struggle
Mhm.
for space was happening
Mhm.
without me even knowing. I think now reflecting back on it,
Mhm.
I was just defending myself and doing kind of like what I thought would be in my best interest, which was I should walk out because this law is my friends say it's a bad thing for me, so I guess because I didn't know English, I didn't know what it meant. I didn't even know what bilingual education was. When you're in it, you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
You just live in it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that transferred into my high school, and in high school, the same thing. I think the city, LA, California was going through a transition, demographic transition, and
Uh-huh.
some people and young people such as myself were people such as ourselves that have benefited from the civil rights were claiming some sort of like rights too, and that was not some other young people that were white were not ready for that either.
Right.
And I think that created conflicts, and no one died there
Yeah.
in my school or nothing, but there was fights, and they were kind of like kind of racial
Mm-hmm.
in tone. But I think a lot of it also was class based.
Mm-hmm.
There's this huge difference between the students that are Latino and white.
Mm-hmm.
There's I think most of the working class whites had moved from
Mhm.
Whittier by that time, like mid '90s,
Okay.
because it became kind of expensive and so forth. So it was like this crop of white people that lived in the hills that owned the manufacturing companies
Mhm.
down in the flatlands, and this like growing Latino population that were working there still.
Uh-huh.
So that's what happened in my high school, and
Right.
that transformed my activism. Just I ran for student government. I was selected, and one of the first things I said, like to get elected, was like I'm gonna make school more fun. So I won.
Substance issue.
Yeah,
Substance
it wasn't
issue in high
about
school
like bread
elections.
and butter issues. It was more like, well, I'll have more parties,
Yeah. And this was your experiment in electoral democracy.
Yes, and it worked, It's like people just want to have fun.
That's
I
funny.
guess.
I did the same thing.
And so, what happened right after high school? When I graduated high school, I think it was like the second day after my graduation, a friend of mine that went to Cal State Fullerton told me, "Aren't you going to college?" I was like, "What?" I didn't know I was supposed to go to college. I thought it was like, you know, you do high school and you go to work, you know.
Yeah.
Because that was kind of like my mentality. Because the other story I didn't tell is like, when I was a sophomore, my mother found me a job. Because in our family, it's like you work hard.
Sure.
It's hard, working hard ethic kind of way of thinking.
Yeah.
And I wasn't thinking about like college, or I didn't even know Berkeley existed by the way, or even UCLA that was closer to Whittier, or even college. Till
So there was no guidance counselors or anything like that that tried to.
There's
send you to
I
college?
had one meeting in the 4 years in high school. I had one meeting with the guidance counselor. His name was his last name was Gandara. It's a Latino counselor that just like I think like 2 months before my graduation called me and I said, do you know that you haven't passed your writing exam proficiency? And I was like, I didn't even know I had to pass that writing proficiency. She's like, oh, there's 2 days from now. Take it so you could just graduate. I took it, I graduated. But that was it's not like he said, obviously I was not on a track to go to college.
Right.
And
So how did you end up going to community college?
I ended up going to community college because my best friend from middle school, from the same class that I was in the bilingual class back years when I moved to the U.S., he was more aware of, and he was more of a track to go to a university. And he just, I guess he wanted me to go too. So he's like, you should go, have you applied? No, I'm like, well, just go to a community college and then transfer or something. So he's the one that pointed me in that direction.
Okay.
He was my guidance counselor, my best friend. And he still is.
Good.
So I went to Fullerton Junior College in Southern California, Fullerton College, and I did terrible. I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't prepared for even junior college level English or math, and I tried all this I'm doing while I'm working.
Right.
And I'm working full time. And eventually it became too hard to hold a full time job and to be in college, and so I flunked out of community college. And I then after that I met the mother of my daughter. I'm a single parent, but at that point I met the mother of my daughter that lives in Southern California, and she's from the same town where I'm from. She moved to Whittier as an immigrant, also as a child immigrant too, and we moved in, and then after like 2 years, we have my daughter Diana, which is still in Whittier, and that also made it hard for me to continue my academic career. So, and then my daughter, she got my ex partner. She got pregnant with my daughter, and so I had to like definitely leave college. And when my daughter was born, I decided I'm gonna just focus on working and creating a family, and at least postpone my education for at least 5 years, so I could spend time at least with my daughter, which is what I did. I took 6 years off of college at the end. Then I came back in 2004. And I've been in college ever since.
And maybe what brought you to Cal then? How did you find yourself at the University of California at Berkeley?
When I went back in 2004, I had decided, no, in 2005, that's when, spring of 2005, I registered at Rio Hondo Community College, which is in Whittier also. And I decided, now I'm going to privilege my education. I'm going to focus, I'm going to just do this. I'm gonna take it serious like a job,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just gonna do really well,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I did. I mean, I got a 4.0 my first semester, and then I guess, I was more prepared. I had life experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and I was more focused, and I also got involved. I started some student groups, and
Mm.
I joined the student government again. I
Mhm.
became a board of trustee member. I was elected,
Mm.
and so I got really engaged with the campus
Mhm.
and with my academics, and I did well at the honors program, and and as I was there, the same friend Alejandro
Mm-hmm.
that had told me years back to go to college. He's like, "Oh, you should apply to Berkeley. My brother goes there.
Mm.
He's graduating this spring." And that same year in 2007, no, 2007, I think that's when I applied.
Mm-hmm.
I came to Cal, and I was like, I came as a visitor to see
Mhm.
my brother's brother graduate.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, it would be great if I could come here. This is amazing. This is so
Mhm.
beautiful. I never seen, a place like this before. So I applied.
Mhm.
Applied to like 5 UCs and 1 out of state.
Mm-hmm.
I got accepted to UCLA. I got accepted to UC San Diego, and at the end UC Berkeley. And I was like, wow, UC Berkeley. I visited all the campus, and I said, no, Berkeley is like the place.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's going to introduce me to a new region of California, a new city. I'm very Southern California centric. And so that's how, through the same friend,
Mm-hmm.
is how I got to know what Berkeley was as a great university.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of one of the reasons I came, because it was the best school that accepted me. And the financial package didn't look that bad, and I was like, oh, okay, their tuition and it's gonna be covered, and I'm gonna get some living expenses paid for. I got a bunch of grants, so it's like this is 2008, the fall 2008,
Okay.
before the budget cuts came,
Right.
a year before. So the prices were like, I think it was like we were paying like 6,000 something
Yeah.
for in-state tuition.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, yeah, it's a good deal. UCLA was offering me kind of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, Berkeley is a better school. I'm just going to go there. That was kind of my assumption.
Uh-huh.
It's going to be worth it.
And so your first year here, were you engaged in any kind of political activity at all?
The first year here, I didn't, because I was afraid I was going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I told my counselors in my community college that I got accepted to Berkeley, they couldn't believe it. They're like, oh, that's going to be so hard. You better be ready. You don't know what you're getting into.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to read like 20 books and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I'm going to have to wake up at 3 in the morning and start reading and then go to sleep at midnight, sleep 3 hours. So I was like, I just need to have a place to sleep so I could just do all this work that I was going to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's kind of like coming from Whittier, coming from community college, and my counselors thinking that I was just going to have a hard time. I was offered to live at Clark Kerr, which is one of the student housing here, but I noticed it was so expensive. It was like, wow, it's like so much. It was like $1,500
Mm-hmm.
per a month.
Yeah.
Included food, I think, but it was like still, to me, it was like,
Mm-hmm.
I lived at home and I paid like $350 a month to my mom. I was like, wow, this is like, I don't know if I'm gonna get enough money for that.
Right.
And so I asked to be moved.
Mm-hmm.
And the second offer of housing was like the UC Village,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm a single parent and I had a
Did
daughter.
you come up here with your daughter?
Initially that was the plan.
Okay.
Then her mom and I decided that maybe it would be best for me to try living here first.
Okay.
And since I was afraid because it was so hard academically and all that, I said, yeah, let's give me like 6 months so I can accommodate myself, find a school and all that. and so when I came, it was like I was spending all these hours in the library just reading every single book because I thought I was gonna fail my first semester, right?
And how'd you do?
I did great.
Yeah, of course. Well, let me ask you, I mean, academically, you're very successful, and we can chronicle some of that. One of the things that I do want to ask, though, is also you're coming to the University of California in a post-Prop 209 era in which affirmative action has been banned. And so you're coming in with a tiny and indeed dwindling cohort of Latino students.
Yeah.
What was the experience like for you moving from a place in Whittier that you said is 70% Latino to a place that's less than 3? What was that like for you?
Since I was so into my books and my academics, I didn't even have a chance to, like, actually. I did notice the faces looked different. The people had hairy faces and like they dressed differently. But then, eventually I bought into that culture. But that wasn't an issue for me at first because I was so into like just school academics.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have to like. I didn't have to like really taste that yet.
Yeah.
But I think eventually it made me feel like I was in a faraway place. That was not Whittier. That was not Southern California. And the thing is, there was a lot more diversity here than in Whittier. Because in Whittier it's just like Mexicans and whites. Here it's like you see black people, you can see Asian Americans of all sorts, and even the Latinos that were here in the university were not really particularly with my own story. A lot of them are from South America. Some of them, they're not off. There was like 2 people or 3 people from Whittier out of the whole school, and I was like looking for them, and I was like, wow, there's so many people from other places, but like only 2 students from Whittier.
So let's move towards 2009 and think about because you're by the end of that year, or even midway by November of 2009, you were pretty much regarded as a major student leader of the movement on campus. So I'm wondering what brought you to engaging in the kind of the level of political activism that you did, and what drew you to it, and what your experiences of that was in that moment in particular. We do want to get to Occupy and things like that, but let's talk about 2009, 2010 for a minute.
So in 2009, in the spring of 2009, I was offered a job here as a Cal ambassador. So basically, I was doing outreach to community colleges around the Bay Area. Mendocino, Los Medanos, that was my main community college where I was working out of. And so it was like this way, because I started noticing that I didn't have enough money for food, because the UC Village rent, the housing, it took a lot of my income that I was receiving as financial aid and loans. So I asked for a job to offset that. And when the spring semester ended, I noticed that I have $15,000 in student loans, and I was like, wow, I need to continue on working, and I need to maybe in the fall semester find a new place to live, probably.
So you had $15,000 in loans after 1 year?
In 1 year.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And I never expected that was going to happen. Because the whole idea when I received the letter is like, we're going to take care of you, financial, everything will be paid, basically. That's kind of like the idea when you get an acceptance letter and then you get a financial package.
Right.
And obviously I didn't do a good job of reading the minor details on how it was going to be okay.
Right.
So when I came back for the fall semester after the summer of 2009, I found out that tuition had been increased.
Mm-hmm.
Housing, the UC Village housing rent for the rent where I was living got increased. Plus, my job was cut. I was laid off. And I was like, wow, what am I going to do? I mean, how can I don't want to get another $15,000 in debt.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was I need to find housing or I need to find another place or other accommodations.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was taking a bus going back to the village to get all my things out of the apartment, because I told the university I was going to leave the student housing, I saw this motorhome on San Pablo,
Mm-hmm.
near university in San Pablo, near that corner. And I was like, that's my solution. My temporary solution is that motorhome right there. I got out of the bus and I saw the price, $1,500, and I said, "Wow, $1,500! If I could live on this thing, I could save a lot of money." So I called a number. I met up with the owner. I bought it. So I started living the spring. This is before the actual organ. I joined the.
Right. So this is the spring of 2009.
This is the spring of 2009, the beginning in August 23rd.
Okay.
I was like already. I moved into this motorhome that had 1979 Toyota with a bunch of holes on the roof. It was leaking from all over. I was trying to stay dry. But I was like, wow, I'm experiencing a different Berkeley now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't have this like nice apartment at the UC Village.
Mm-hmm.
The price of coming here has increased. They're not giving me more grants.
Mm-hmm.
They're just offering me more loans.
Mm-hmm.
And I started thinking about my daughter and thinking about my younger brothers because I'm the oldest.
Mm-hmm.
And my sister goes to Santa Cruz now.
Mm-hmm.
And my younger brother might go to Santa Cruz this fall.
Good.
But I was thinking about them and they were not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking if this continues to increase and I'm supposed to like lead the way, where am I leading them to?
Mm-hmm.
You know, debt. So I need some people from geography because I'm the geography department here is pretty active around social issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I started just getting educated by Richard Walker, which is one of the professors that's pretty active around budget cut issues here in education. And I just started like thinking, wow, maybe I should like tell my story, and it might help make a point that things are not okay. Because the discourse of Burgeneau, the chancellor of the university, was like, poor students would not feel the effect of this. We're gonna take care of them because they're part of the blue and gold scholarship or something,
Right.
for poor minorities.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm part of that, and I'm living in my motorhome. What does that say? I'm not getting any special deal here. So I was like, there was a couple marches, a couple rallies that were organized here on Sprout Plaza, and I went and I stood there and I was like being educated by other students, and we started just talking about our issues, and eventually I found out about this event at the MLK building, where the chancellor was going to have an open town to talk about the future of education, the future of the campus, and how do we go about like dealing with these budget cuts that are very real. So I went out there very open-minded. I want to hear what this guy has to say. And there were some students that were like really vocal about telling the chancellor about his priorities in regards to the stadium, the investments on this campus, and kind of like some of the infrastructure projects as we find our university, departments not having their own phone line live phones. And so I wrote 3 things in a piece of paper. I'm saying I'm gonna go speak and I'm gonna say my own words too. So I went up to the microphone and I say, you know, you say that you care about poor students and you care about minority students. My name is Ramon Quintero. I'm an undergrad in geography. I'm a transfer student, single parent. I have 3 questions for you. One is like, why do you prioritize, you know, building all this infrastructure for the stadium, as at the same time as my geography department's phone lines are being cut. They don't even have phones anymore. And why do I, a student that comes to the best university, public university in the world, have to live in a motorhome? And I think those sort of questions of why.
Yeah. Well, what did the chancellor say?
And at the end I said, why do we have to pay $2.5 million to a football coach?
Yeah.
Why are these priorities? And why are you saying that you support poor students? Why you're obviously, you know, allowing for the football coach to make so much money? He's the highest paid, you know, public employee in the state. Where are the priorities? And so that's like the whole crowd went crazy. They were like, yeah, where do you live, Chancellor? In a mansion type of deal. And so I think that was like a pivotal moment on me going public.
Yeah.
That I was living in a motorhome and that the university was not being really honest about their priorities. There was a discourse of what their priorities were, and there was a reality of what their priorities were.
Right.
And I think those 3 questions that I asked kind of pointed out to those 3 very simple, obvious things. And obviously I'm there, and I'm living in a motorhome. Here's the proof. I'm a student here. You're not, the blue and gold is not doing the job, obviously. So that from there, that moment on, I went public with my story, and I already knew a lot of the student organizers at the time.
Yeah.
And so I joined them, out of me being in this situation that allowed me to understand the implications of that my brothers would be eventually part of, and my daughter. Because I was thinking, because it was embarrassing for me to say I'm living in a motorhome to me, because I have never lived in my motorhome in my life. You know, I'm a poor person, but in Mexico, poor people don't live in motorhomes. They have their own home for the most part, especially in the rural sector. And so, but I did it for my daughter. I did it for other students that I knew that were AB 540 students that I knew on campus that worked like 60 hours a week, and that couldn't afford to pay the tuition because they don't actually get any financial aid.
Right. We should say just the AB 540 students are undocumented students.
The AB 540 students are the undocumented students that get admitted to Berkeley because they go through the public education system in California.
Right.
And I saw myself in them because it had only been a few years since I became legal.
Right. Or
documented. And so I was like, oh, I could have been in their boat.
Sure.
And this boat is sinking too. So I was like, and what does that mean, you know? So I also gotta admit, like, the number one believer in the American dream and working hard, and this is all my family. Like, they all have this, and they believe that this is the land of the free, and there's opportunities. And to come, and for me, my family, when I left Whittier, my family was so proud of me that I was going to university. They still don't know what Berkeley really is. They just think it's a good school.
Right.
But I was like, wow, this is so terrible because I'm supposed to be like this role model that, where am I leading them to? You know, more depth. And I started just being educated and radicalized by professors, not just professors, but like my fellow students, and not just my fellow students, but my situation. And I think when you live in a car in the streets, you get to see different things and hear different things that you never do when you're inside a building.
Well, like what? Can you give me an example?
Basically, like I was parking on Cedar Road
Mm-hmm.
by North Berkeley. There's a park there called Cedar Park,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a public restroom there that doesn't have any doors, so there's a lot of people go through that all night long. And I would just hear like people sitting on the sidewalk like at 2:30 in the morning having a conversation with like someone else that lost their home, that lost their family, that lost their job. The noise, you can't really go to sleep because it's so, you get disturbed by cars driving by.
Mm-hmm.
It moved. It was shaking my motorhome every time a car drove by it. And I started noticing things that I never noticed before that you don't get when you live in a home, which is like you start noticing like wild animals in the streets, you know, from like deer to like even packs of dogs are like roaming.
We killed a mountain lion up in that neighborhood not that long ago.
Yeah. I mean, it was like wow. There's like all this world that I don't
Yeah.
get to see because I'm inside a house.
Yeah.
And so I saw like the difference between. So I wasn't like completely like out in the open,
Right.
living in the urban space,
Mm-hmm.
but it was like in such proximity to homelessness and even people that have drug addiction issues or
Mm-hmm.
so forth. And then I started noticing that there was other students that were living in the car too. Because you start, when you become part of a population, you start noticing people that have similar things in you.
Uh-huh.
And I started noticing that these students were not necessarily color-skinned students. They were white students that were middle class. That I started, one of them, his name was Matt, and he was a student here. He graduated.
Matt Marks?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he was living right next to me, and I was like, I got to know this guy. Here I am, like this Mexican American kid or Chicano kid that's like from Mexico, and then this guy from Maine, the Northeast, like living. Both of you are living in their cars, because even I qualify for all this financial aid, but it's still like not enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even being super poor.
Mm-hmm.
And you get help because that's the only way you can get help is being really poor. And this guy is being middle class or so forth, or from that origin, or working class a little, but not obviously not from the history of migration that I had, right?
Right.
But then when you started having like these like moments of like talking about like the issues that were facing us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're very similar. It's a class issue here. It's like,
Yeah.
that goes beyond like my race and your race. It's like we're obviously being hit with the same baton, you know?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter who's holding the baton, they're hitting us. So that's 2009.
Right.
So I
Well,
was
so by the November strikes, you were kind of regarded as a student leader. You overcome this kind of initial hesitancy, and your story was actually pretty became widely known. I mean, you were written up in the New York Times. You were followed by a Time magazine correspondent. There were articles about you in the Nation. I mean, what was that like?
I was a little hesitant to go, especially those mainstream kind of media outlets, because I didn't know how the story could be used.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end, I said, you know what? I'm just gonna take a risk. I'm just gonna tell my story, and hopefully this will debunk this idea that the people that are active on this movement are a bunch of hippies that are so privileged that they don't have nothing else to do.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's like here I'm a single parent. I have worked almost 15 years before I even came to Berkeley.
Yeah.
And you go to my taxes, you can see I could retire, I think, now and get like $200 a month. So it's not like I'm this like not bred hippie, whatever that means to the larger population. But I was like, I wanted my story to diversify the way people saw who was actually getting involved in these in this struggle
Right.
around budget cuts and student in education.
Mm-hmm.
So I just started organizing around different groups, and eventually I got, like you said, I was known as, I became known for being a student activist on campus, and so I got I saw myself as a vehicle of like bringing people together.
Yeah.
Like people from the co-ops
Mm-hmm.
that I knew, people from the Chicano, Latino organizations on campus,
Mm-hmm.
and also just people from fraternities. Like I invited them to be part of this,
Mm-hmm.
because I told them right now it's us, but you guys are next, basically.
Yeah.
And so my role, I think, up to this point is to use my own story to channel a different narrative than what the administration was using, and also to contradict a lot of the mainstream kind of like ways of thinking about like who actually takes part in these movements.
Right.
So that was my, at this point, and then once I became known, then I had enough like local, like my daughter says, Dad, you're only known in Berkeley. No one else knows you. Okay, yeah. But so I became known, so I started telling people to join.
Mm-hmm.
So my role became more like to invite people, and it's okay.
I can assure you were more widely known than just in Berkeley. I have friends on the East Coast saying, so do you know that homeless student? You know, I read about this homeless student in the New York Times. And I'm like, yes, I know Ramon. Like, he's very important. You know, he's very important. It was exactly, you bring people in from elsewhere around the story.
And I think that was that's why I put my story forward.
Yeah.
So that people...
It's very brave of you, though, to put just your personal life out there. Because, I mean, and you spoke a bit earlier to say that this is something that could be seen as very shameful, that, it's dangerous to one degree or another. It's certainly expanding your view of things, but the sense that you spoke earlier of having to kind of, the contradictions between your own experience and what the imagined kind of American dream is, and to break through that is
the number one people that are afraid and do not really appreciate that is like my family, the community I claim that I belong to, Whittier. It's like when they heard about these articles and these, they're like, "Are you okay, man?" It's like, "Can we help you?" "Yeah, you can help me by creating a scholarship for me if you want." They're like, but it was like for them, it was like so.
Meeting down in UCLA, you could go meet them.
Yeah, they're like, wow, they didn't know that there was these issues. They found out about these issues through me, but they were surprised that I would be in that situation.
Yeah,
because their idea is like, oh, no one could ever be in that situation.
Yeah,
that belongs to our community.
Right.
And it's not. It's just because they think working hard, but those jobs have.
Yeah.
Now they understand. I go back and they're like, "Wow, you were basically telling us there was a crisis coming, and we're like, we don't have any jobs right now, and we haven't paid our mortgage for the last 7 months."
Really?
But at the beginning in 2009, when there were like a lot of them still had jobs.
Yeah.
They were like kind of like shimming me a little bit, and that was very hard for me to go forward because I was not so much concerned about the broader, like. Someone in New York might say, "Oh, this guy is a lazy guy," whatever. But it was more like my family, the city of Whittier, the people that I knew, the leaders that supported me when I was there, and I didn't want them to be disappointed.
Right.
But at the end, I decided, you know what? It's better just to be honest and say this is because I think there is a need for more people to actually come out and say, I'm having a hard time, and this is my name, and this is what the hard time is for me.
Yeah. I think a lot of us still have shame around things like debt and stuff like that. I think that's hard.
And I think this Occupy movement has and we'll go to that, right?
I want to talk about that. Go ahead.
But I think this is a part of that is like it's allowing for people to come out basically and say I have issues too.
Yeah. No, I think that that's very important.
Because I think the hegemonic, or without using that fancy word, but more like the mainstream idea is that it's your fault.
Right.
It's your fault because you don't work hard enough. Come on, you're in the most wealthy country. There's so many opportunities and blah blah. And and so people, when they work hard, because people work really hard and they don't, they can't afford to pay a mortgage.
Yeah.
They don't say anything.
Right.
I mean, they say things, but they say it to themselves. They say, "Oh," and I think Occupy movement is like, it's not. It stops. It's like this effort to like not just say it to yourself, say it to other people, and not only say it to other people that are in the same boat, but make claims to the larger society. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's like a building up a self-esteem as a political group and as a political political social movement. It's like to be able to say, yeah, no, you know, and we have rights too.
Right.
We deserve, we work. We're, you know, we're not, we've been here before that. It's not like all these people from Occupy were not part of the United States.
Right.
They are. It's just like people, I think that's one of the things that I see as a positive.
Yeah.
In that.
I agree. Let's talk about the van itself for a minute here. Like, I mean, because part of it is that what we're talking about is the publicity. And if you have time issues, you'll know.
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah.
Part of it is the way in which you know your story is in the New York Times, and you're taking on a kind of leadership position. But then you also, the van itself became a kind of object of protest. That you had this idea to transform it into a kind of mobile mural. Can you tell us about what that, what the project was, and how you came to that idea? Yeah.
Well, it came out of the kind of like almost the same thinking of, like, I'm gonna, you know, put my own personal story out there. Then so I'm expanding from a space, right, my personal space, and this is the motorhome. I own it, and I said, well, if I could put my personal story over there, why not use this vehicle to create some kind of like how you say vehicle, another vehicle by which people could express themselves beyond my personal story. So I decided to use the vehicle as a mural for the student movement. So I started asking people to paint it, and to paint about how are the budget cuts affecting you. So I started here in Berkeley. So I went to the clubs, I went to the sororities, I went to the Chicano orgs, and I said, here's a space, here's some brushes. I'm creating this project where people could, you know, express themselves in public, because some of the issues I think on this campus are like the lack of like space for people to express themselves, and without any constraints or with minimal constraints. And basically, all I told people is just don't write something that's offensive to someone else directly. And here in Berkeley, it got like like a lot of people just started painting about different issues, racial, class, gender, even anti-war. There's some veterans from Iraq that were painting, and I have it all documented on Facebook. But then after that, it's like I have friends in Santa Cruz, and they're like, "Oh, bring it over here so we can paint it." Then I got this idea to take it to all the UCs and take it to a few community colleges and Cal States and some elementaries, to the point that this car is about over 150 people, different people from different communities and different universities, even a professor and PhD students and undergrads, and two elementary schools have contributed to this mural. And what I thought it was great is that I could take this mural on the road. So I drove to UCLA, and they painted a little bit. I went to UC San Diego, they painted a little bit. And in every space that I was going to, there's like all these there were similarities in the needs that students had, and there was also like some differences too, like in community colleges. There's a large population of like veterans that go to community colleges, and they took a big part of it, and they're like, they just wrote "end it," and I was like, what does that mean? Because I didn't even know, because I just gave them a brush and I said, you guys want to paint? Okay. I didn't know they were veterans, so they told me.
Yeah.
And I was like, why did you paint "end it"? What does that mean? And he's like, we're veterans from Iraq and we think this war is a waste of time and is doing a lot of harm to people. And so stories like that kind of like, so the car itself, the outside at least, I basically donated to the people that wanted to paint it. I painted very little on that car. Most of the paintings and all that, it's just students and community members and teachers, professors that wanted to express themselves. And that's so it's a collective kind of art project,
right?
Basically, and I think people love it because everyone sees something in it that they could connect to it.
Yeah,
and that's the beauty of having a diverse kind of construction of something, because even if you don't agree with that, there's something there that represents you, and you're like, okay, well, I guess it's not that bad. So people feel included to a certain degree in the motorhome. In the movie Mural, and it has this name Santa Rita. Some student named it Santa Rita after the Alameda County Jail. But then I found out that Santa Rita is the saint of the impossible causes in the 16th century in Italy, and so it has all these stories that have come out of there that are very fascinating, I think. And my daughter loves it. She thinks it's like the greatest thing ever. I don't have a tree house, but I have a motorhome that's painted, so that's great.
No, I think it is pretty spectacular in terms of, but it's fascinating the way you talk about it, the way that you're not only collecting images and you're collecting physical contributions, but also the stories of the people who are making those contributions, and you're, in a certain sense, knitting the UC system and the California higher education in general together in your travels, and as you become this touring roadshow. I think it's
basically that's what and when you're on the road, you get like 90% thumbs up, 10% thumbs down. That's still a good ratio.
That's very good. That's very good. Yeah. No, and if you didn't get that 10%, then there's something. There's got to be something wrong. Right?
Yeah, I'm like, okay, well, that's not that bad.
And so now, I mean, are you living in the van still?
I am partially living in the van because I still cannot afford to have my own apartment without getting into ridiculously amounts of debt, as in with the BA, and so I have all my books in the motorhome, most of my books. Some of my clothes, I pay for a sofa in one of my friend's house. I paid for the sofa for the space, and which is like $350, $400 a month. So when it's rainy, because the motorhome leaks and it's not really like livable. But it does serve to store things that I need, like clothes, and there's some parts of it that doesn't get wet. So that's why I have my books. And
you still use it for political purposes. I mean, I saw you yesterday at the May Day rally, driving along in the rally. How do people respond to you as you're driving your motorhome down through a public march?
Oh, they love it. They think it's like the greatest thing ever. And a lot of these, I think what it does, because it's been over 3 or 4 years that this motorhome has been joining the marches and different rallies, that is known. Yeah. So people that have been part of marches before or May Day in other years, it's like a way of like remembering that remembering their past and connecting to the past and saying it will continue.
Mm-hmm.
Like it has a continuation. It's not like something that just happens one day.
Mm-hmm.
But look, the motorhome shows up every year.
Mm-hmm.
That means we need to show up every year too.
Right.
So it creates this idea of like having a responsibility towards things that you believe in,
Right.
and having a continuation
Mm-hmm.
of the struggle. And it's not like one of those things that you just do once in your lifetime and then you just go retire.
Right.
But it's something that you have to come out and defend, what you consider to be your right,
Mm-hmm. So this is a good segue, I think, to talk about Occupy,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of kind of trying to end with this, perhaps. But
Yeah.
because in a sense, we have the events in 2009, 2010, in which the mantra largely here was occupy everything. They were occupying campus buildings, and that language, the O word, really was resonating through the UC system, particularly Santa Cruz and Berkeley and elsewhere. And now we are, starting at least in the fall of 2011, we in the midst of the Occupy Wall Street movement, in particular Occupy Oakland. What has your involvement with that been like, and has it changed your focus in any ways? Do you still remain grounded largely in issues around public education? Has it altered your emphasis or interest, and let alone your participation?
First of all, I always thought that the Occupy movement or any effort to bring light to the lack of equitable distribution of wealth in our society,
Mm-hmm.
from the get-go, I was in favor of it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's politics of who's leading it, who's that part of that for me is the main issue for me. I think in the U.S. is that people don't come out.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that people have certain strategies that don't work or work.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like if there's something happening, like an occupation of a farm, an occupation of downtown Oakland, and it's in the name of bringing to light some of the social issues that we have.
Mm-hmm.
From the get-go, I was in favor of it, not just because ideologically I'm in line with those ways of thinking, but it's also because I knew a lot of the people that are part of the organizing,
Mm-hmm.
and someone used to be UC Berkeley students
Mm-hmm.
that used to do things here on campus, but now they're moving to the city
Mm-hmm.
and moving to other states too. I mean, there's people that were part here of the student movement in 2009 that are in New York,
Mm-hmm.
taking part in the Occupy Wall Street movement, and they're pretty, they're leaders over there too.
Mm-hmm.
And so one is having proximity to some of the people that are organizing,
Uh-huh.
and being able to go beyond this discourse whether this is good or bad. It's like if your friends are doing it and you love your friends and you think it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And second, ideologically, if you think in the general scheme of things, you would support it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I went. As soon
Yeah.
as I found out, I started joining them, and I started creating these small little my contribution has been more like creating spaces so people could take part of us, take part on the to be part of a movement. Not necessarily, you don't have to, not everyone has to march.
Mm-hmm.
Some people need to write, some people need to paint, some people, it's good. I think creating spaces so people could express themselves in different ways, but still be, feel like they're part of the movement. I think it's important to expand and to broaden and to reinforce, and I think my thing was I'm gonna take the motorhome, I'm gonna do what I do best, which is create the space so people could paint. So I created, I helped create these panels that I display here on during the Occupy movement,
Uh-huh.
and people were painting on it, and they're writing all kinds of things. And I think just creating the artistic, just the actual moment that people take part of something, I think it's important for me because I think it makes them feel like they have ownership of things.
Yeah.
And so, so my involvement with the Occupy movement, ACAL, I mean, I got arrested in November 9th for, I was part of the students that were like in a line,
Right.
protecting the tents.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And why did they? What was that like? I mean, the arrest. Were you singled out? Do you feel because of you were recognizable, or were you just dragged out of there with a group of other people? What was that like?
You know, I think as far as the initial arrest, I don't know if it was so much targeted, but I feel it was just because when I was below Sprout Hall, detained, I started just recognizing faces of people that have been part of the student movement for like 4 years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's so many other students out there. Why are you
Yeah.
here?
Because I saw the cops go in and just drag Ricardo Gomez out.
And Ricardo
first,
is such a visible student activist.
Oh, so are you.
And yeah, myself too. But it's easier when you see other people. Like to see yourself being targeted is kind of difficult. You just feel that, but you don't see it.
Yeah.
Like when people tell you, I think for me it's easier to comment on Ricardo. And Ricardo is like you see the video. He's not even near the office. The officers obviously go to just grab him. And I think in my case, I was even at the point that I was being dragged by the hair. I wasn't even blocking the officers. They had no necessity of getting me at all. They could have just walked by. I wasn't resisting. I wasn't blocking their path. But there is something to be said about surveillance of student activists and creating paperwork to so you can curtail their activities on campus. And I mean, I think proof of that is more than just being targeted to arrest you. It's more like pursuing criminal charges for specific people. When there was like 43 people that were arrested, and only 13 get put in the line of that you committed a crime.
Okay, so you were officially charged then. You were one of those 13 people who were officially charged by the Alameda District Attorney.
Yes, and as you may know now, they've been dismissed. Most of these charges, I believe. Mine has been dismissed.
I think all but one.
All by one.
Yeah.
And hopefully that will be dismissed because it's just political targeting of people. If you ask me, I don't think no one in that day committed any crime besides police brutality or something. So I would state for the record that I do believe there was targeting of people. In the initial arrest, there were 43 people. Not all those people that were arrested out of those 43 were visible but where you could see the people that are visible get targeted is when they push to incriminate you in something.
Right.
And I think that's where I just say, yeah, we were definitely targeted.
And is this the first time you've been arrested for?
No, that was my third time. My first time I got arrested was in Wheeler in 2010. The occupation of Wheeler Open University.
Right. Okay, so the morning raid.
The 3:30 in the morning raid.
Right.
That was kind of like if they were busting a meth lab or something, and we're all like writing papers.
I feel like an Iowa meatpacking plant. It's like an ice raid.
Yeah, it was
a
like
meatpacking plant or something like that. Yeah, it was ridiculous.
And the second one was.
I got a phone call from Matt Marks who had jumped out a window. Called me at 4:00 in the morning.
Some people.
I guess you were arrested there.
I was arrested there, and then I was arrested for protesting the Blum Center, which I think the Blum Center for the Study of
Global Poverty.
Global poverty.
Like that, yes. This being Richard Blum, one of the regents of the University of California.
Yes, and one of them, one of the people, if you know something about him, he makes money out of oil profiteering and student loans and there's a lot of he has his hands in a lot of construction business interests that are part of the money making machine of the UC. But for me, I was protesting the lack. Why are we? I was protesting the center, not so much like the person, even though the person can be protested.
It's an object of protest as well.
Yeah, but the center itself, this focus towards global poverty, which is very important that we know. But it seems to me like there's so many issues internally that need to resolve, and the way I am is like you first got to resolve your personal problems before you go abroad and try to fix someone else's problem. It might be related to your problem, but like for me it's like this is a lack. It should be a center for the study of American poverty.
Right, which it seems then strikes me as significant that someone like yourself, with a relatively well-known public story, would be arrested in that place protesting for those reasons. I think you're a good person to bring that message.
Yeah, and I'm speaking from far away. It's like far away. I'm just screaming. This is why don't you pay attention to your poor here? Isn't there enough poor people in Oakland? Isn't there enough poor people in LA? Isn't there enough people in the Central Valley? Why don't you direct those studies, for poor students? And I mean, it's not. I didn't do anything illegal. I mean, but I guess you can't speak up in public anymore in certain spaces. So that was, it's also an exercise in free speech that I was doing. Not only like saying something I believe in, but also but it's like, let me see how much freedom I really have.
Right.
And apparently I don't have that much freedom. Because it only lasted like a minute or two.
Right.
And Ricardo Gomez was arrested that time too.
And so it's a reunion in the,
it's a reunion.
In the basement of
the basement of buildings. Yeah. So
and so what's the current status of that case in particular? Just the charges have been dropped and are you more or less cleared, or?
Yeah, I mean the charges have been dropped. There's no crime committed. It's like all they do is they just put you through the process of this bureaucratic kind of punishment for being an activist, and they try to like curtail your voice so other people don't feel like they actually do that too.
But this hasn't dissuaded you at all, or has it made you nervous, or has it encouraged you, like the facing arrest for using your free speech rights?
I think for me it's like I firmly believe in free public education, and I firmly believe that we need to really question how we prioritize the allocation of resources of this nation. And since I am by choice, I am also a U.S. citizen. I also care about like the direction that we're moving towards, and what kind of country or what kind of nation is going to be, successful in the future without educating a huge amount of people.
Right.
So it's like I don't want my daughter to have to immigrate to China and go through the same process I did, immigrating to the United States. I don't want my grandkids to go through the same process. If the ideal world for me would be like no borders, a global society on which we prioritize, human allocation of like the most needed resources, which is like housing, food, and education, and sustainable living. But as far as the United States, I think for me it's like my family is my source of encouragement, and no police department or no baton is going to stop me from speaking to what I really think is important for my family, and because that's where I depart from. I love people, my friends, and I love you know, I have this enormous love for like this country and all its people. But at the same time, it's like what really grounds me, what really drives me forward, is my daughter, my sister, my mother, and you know that small community in Southern California called Whittier, which I think is like it keeps me honest. I think. But at the same time, kind of looking as far as Maine, you know, those people are part of like the same community, but in a larger scale, you know, and it's important to recognize that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So just as a way of wrapping up here, I think this has been really good. Like, what's next for you? What do you?
Well, as I have shared with you before, I got accepted to Columbia University graduate school. They're not giving me that much financial package for me to go out there and kind of like continue on this academic path. So at this point, I end my career here at Berkeley this semester. And May 17, I walk and I get my other BA in ethnic studies, which I'm very proud of. And I'm gonna stay engaged. You know, I think this is a growing niche of people questioning why do we have why do we have all these wars, continuous wars since World War II, when there's so many other things we can do with these resources. One of them being constructing another 20 UC campuses, which should be, if we wanted to have a wealth-creating state, as we all know, the UCs have contributed greatly to, you know, making California such an important state in terms of research and development.
Right.
And I just think like we need to pursue that. If something works, we need to pursue that a little more. And if something does not work, we need to question it. And I think I'm going to continue to question things that I believe don't work, which is this like push towards like all for one and none for all, you know. And so that's kind of my thing.
That's great. Let's end it there. I'll give you talk career advice afterwards.
Okay.
But thank you very much. So we're going to end here. But all right. But all right. But all right. But all right. But all right.